Hello and welcome! Today I've been requested to review yet another version of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, but this time it's the Krome Studios console port. I decided to pick up the Wii version of this game specifically since it was the cheapest version of this game. It made me wonder why it might have been so cheap and easy to get a hold of. Perhaps it's the most popular version of this game because it has motion controls that makes you feel like a Jedi. Or perhaps it's the worst version of this game. Today's video is sponsored by 16-Bit Store. At 16-Bit, we pride ourselves in our designs and the quality of our printed products. From our display stands to our styluses, our cases, shells, and more. Explore our selection at 16bitstore.com today and get 15% off your next order with offer code 16bitreview when you order 2 or more items. For those of you who haven't seen my previous Star Wars The Force Unleashed reviews, here's a quick recap of what this game is and my opinion on the Krome versions of The Force Unleashed. Star Wars The Force Unleashed told the story, which is no longer canon, of Darth Vader's secret apprentice between episodes 3 and 4. At its core, The Force Unleashed is a brawler where you kick ass with the Force and a lightsaber. But beyond that, The Force Unleashed experience vastly changes depending on what version of the game you were playing. The LucasArts developed game for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC are dead set on telling the story, while the Krome version of the PSP, Wii, PS2, and now Switch versions of the game are more focused on the gameplay and a large level design. Despite my preference to the way LucasArts told the story, I actually preferred the Krome version on the PSP, since the game was a lot more replayable and had a lot more content to enjoy. And I was hoping that the same thing was true for the Wii version. I think it's a bit of a shame that I never considered buying this version of the game back in the day due to my immense disdain towards the Wii and its waggle. But I wanted to give this game a fair shot. Who knows? Maybe the waggle isn't that bad. Well, after I was greeting with the oh-so-familiar intro and cutscene, my initial impressions of the controls weren't bad. I was cutting down enemies and blasting the Force every which way, but I started to notice that something wasn't right when my Wiimote started sounding like it was dying. What's supposed to happen is that anytime I swing the controller, the Wiimote should be making saber noises, but for me, this happens. It's almost as if the game itself is trying to tell me to stop playing with the motion controls. Obviously, I ignored it and pressed on. But while the opening level was fun, once I started playing the core game, I started struggling to enjoy the experience as the novelty of this gimmick was wearing on me the more I played it. The way I expected the motion controls to work was for the game to track my motions somewhat, like a VR game would. But the motion controls that are in this game are basically over-glorified buttons attached to basic movement. Any motion can be recognized as an input. I can just shake my hand wildly and Starkiller performs the perfect combos without a care in the world or what I'm actually doing in real life. And while that does allow me to just sit down and enjoy the simplified combat, other than the quick-time events during the boss fights in normal gameplay, I just wish I could rip out the nunchuck and plug in a normal controller. Force powers are an absolute pain, and I feel this aged hardware is not holding up so well. I could never force choke an enemy consistently. And with the sheer lack of face buttons on the Wii controller, doing basic platforming tasks was shockingly painful. I personally want to thank the genius that decided to put the sprint and the block button on A. But Koda's fight wasn't too bad though, so perhaps this was just the level, or the lack of power-ups. You know, maybe I should give this game a second chance. Let's just see how bad Raxus Prime is. Going into the Switch version of the game, I was greeted with the most beautiful thing I can imagine. Controller options. I went through the intro as Vader with the Pro Controller, and when I made it to Starkiller and the Imperial Shipyard, I was able to switch over to motion controls. And I can honestly say moving to the Switch was the best decision I made. The default controls with a Pro Controller are exactly the same as they are on PS2, and they feel like what I'm used to on the PS3. So I felt like things were finally getting back to normal, and I was starting to really enjoy this version of the game and seeing the differences, like the new enemy types that were cut for the PSP version, as well as the better and improved visuals. But what surprised me more was what happened when I gave the motion controls a second chance. I was surprised with how enjoyable it was as an experience, though it's still very much gimmicky. They are the exact same controls as you are used to on the Wii, but it actually takes advantage of the buttons. So thank you, Unknown Aspire developer, who actually separated the sprint and the block buttons. And since we are now using more precise motion controls, I felt the Switch's Joy-Cons were a lot more accurate, or at least a lot less glitchy. Yes, Starkiller still swings wildly if you just shake your hands around, but I can actually use the Force Choke now, and I was always made a point to finish my fights when I'm using motion controls by choking the last enemy, just because I can now. So once I caught up to where I was with the Wii version of the game, I actually made it through Raxus Prime with the motion controls. And while I can honestly say this isn't my preferred playstyle, I can understand its appeal. And I think my frustration might have been down to just the age of the Wii version. Motion controls have come a surprisingly long way since the mid-2000s. So I don't entirely blame the Wii version for its glitchy implementation. But what I do blame Krome for is the sheer lack of alternatives to the motion controls. Since even on the Switch version, by the time I was being murdered by Vader, I grew tired of even the Switch's motion controls and wanted to go back to a more conventional way of playing. Thankfully, the Switch, it's as easy as going into the menu. But all in all, Star Wars The Force Unleashed is a pretty good game even on the Nintendo Wii. And for how cheap it often goes for, it's not a bad deal. The Switch version is honestly the better game, though, since you have the control schemes from both the PSP and PS2 versions, but you also have the options of the Wii's motion controls. Plus, it's often on sale too, a lot more expensive than the Wii version, but the Switch version is definitely a good buy. But it is missing the features of the PSP version, like the Force Unleashed modes. I understand why the Switch port was based on the Wii game instead of the PSP's, I just wish they found a way to include it, as it would have given the game a lot of additional replay value. But anyways, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you have yourself a good day, and as always, take care.